She broke the alien's training bot clean in half, with nothing more than a lazy yawn. That morning, the Academy's combat theory class was meant to stay calm and quiet, with glowing panels full of tactical equations and energy field diagrams. Yet, in the middle of lecture, the walls clicked into amber alert. Lights dimmed, and the floor retracted to reveal the arena grid. Combat mode was never activated without warning. But today, the alien instructors wanted to test the human girl who sat among them. Her name was Koara, the lone Earth exchange student, small compared to the hulking reptilian Vorka, or the crystalline Shillans who surrounded her. The class hissed and clicked in amusement, expecting the simulation to flatten her in seconds. The arena materialized a dozen drone soldiers, towering metal frames, armed with glowing blades. They reflected the combat scenarios designed to push cadets to their physical limits. Koara stepped forward without any armor or weaponry. The others laughed, their voices echoing metallic and strange, but the instructors leaned closer with interest. She crouched low, watching the first drone's mechanical joints shift. Its swing was fast, meant to intimidate, but Koara ducked beneath, letting the blade whistle over her head. Her hands shot out and struck the inside of the drone's knee joint, a simple human move that any wrestling coach on Earth would recognize. The machine buckled with a screech. The class fell silent. Another drone lunged, blade flashing, but Koara spun and vaulted onto its chest, using nothing but momentum. She wrapped her arm around its throat-like frame and twisted until sparks burst. The alien cadets gawked. Their kind relied on weapons, energy fields, and strength. The human was dismantling advanced simulators with bare hands and clever leverage. A third rushed her, but Koara let herself drop backward, kicking upward at just the right angle. Its chest plate caved, and she rolled free before it collapsed in a heap. She wasn't moving with rage or desperation. She fought like someone working through a math problem, jotting notes in her mind about pressure points and weight distribution. The instructor, a four-eyed, hissed commands to the control panel, increasing drone speed and strength. The floor shook as more units emerged, each calibrated to exceed cadet performance. Koara exhaled, dusted her palms, and charged straight into them. She darted between strikes, slipping through spaces that the taller aliens would never notice, seizing joints and weak spots with ruthless precision. A crystalline cadet muttered that humans lack natural armor or claws, yet somehow, this human fought as though her entire body were a weapon. Koara vaulted off one drone's collapsing frame, landing in a roll before sweeping another's legs. She slammed her palm into its chest until it powered down. Every move drew gasps, each takedown a lesson her classmates hadn't studied. The arena floor grew littered with sparking remains, and the smell of scorched circuits filled the air. Sweat clung to Koara's forehead, but her eyes glinted with that strange human fire that unsettled the alien. She wasn't born with mandibles or crystal spines, but she carried something harder to quantify: adaptability. The simulation tried to shift strategy, sending drones in coordinated formations. Koara grinned faintly, then ducked low, forcing them to strike one another. She guided the chaos like a conductor, weaving through and redirecting their momentum. A towering drone swung down from behind, and the class collectively inhaled, expecting her end. Koara sidestepped and slapped its blade aside, jamming her shoulder into its center. She kicked upward once, and the machine toppled backward, its alloy skull cracking against the arena floor. The room erupted, not with cheers, but stunned silence. Every alien eye was on her. The lesson had shifted. The human was no longer a subject of ridicule, but the living demonstration of combat theory in its rawest form. Koara stood among the debris, chest rising and falling, hands scraped but steady. She glanced at the instructors, who stared as if re-evaluating centuries of training method. She tilted her head, as if asking if that was all they had. The control panel hummed, and more drones rose from the floor, heavier and armed with pulse cannons. The instructor's voice quivered slightly, announcing the escalation. Koara rolled her shoulders and smirked. This was only the beginning of class. The second wave of drones was not like the first. These were taller than Koara by several heads, their arms mounted with pulse cannons that hummed with energy. The alien cadets shifted nervously in their seats, scales and crystalline surfaces reflecting the flicker of the arena's red lights. The Shilin cadet who had mocked Kara earlier whispered something about the absurdity of a human even surviving the next 30 seconds. Kara raised her hits anyway, bare skin against alloy, as if she hadn't heard or simply didn't care. The drones spread into a semicircle and opened fire. Beams of searing blue cut across the arena, sizzling the floor where she had stood a heartbeat before. Kara dove forward, tucking into a roll, and came up right beneath the first drone. She struck its cannon arm with her elbow hard enough to jar the joint, then kicked its leg out. Sparks cascaded down as the weapon misfired into another drone's shoulder. The class murmured in disbelief, realizing she had just turned the enemy's own firepower into a weakness. More bolts streaked toward her. Kara used the debris of fallen drones as cover, vaulting behind smoking husks and weaving between the fire. She had no energy shields, no armor, just timing, instincts, and the strange human ability to improvise. One cannon blast grazed her shoulder, singing the fabric of her academy uniform. She hissed at the sting, but didn't. Instead, she grabbed a broken arm from a fallen drone, hefting it like a club. The aliens gasped. She was arming herself with scraps, something they never considered in their meticulously planned simulations. She swung the metal limb with precision, smashing into the head of the nearest drone. The unit staggered, giving her just enough time to jam the sparking end of the club into its chest plate. The machine convulsed and collapsed, the lights in its sensors flickering out. Kara exhaled through her teeth, eyes darting between the remaining drones. Her classmates whispered furiously, their disbelief turning into a kind of fearful awe. The crystalline Shilin clutched the edge of its desk, muttering that humans were reckless beyond logic. A Vor cadet with thick scales growled softly, as if beginning to respect what he saw. The instructors exchanged glances, trying not to show the surprise, but their hands hovered over the control systems. Kara slid low beneath a volley of blasts, then sprang upward, planting her feet on the chest of one drone and shoving off. She spun midair and landed atop another, slamming her makeshift weapon down repeatedly until sparks sprayed out. She rode the collapsing frame down, rolling free just before it hit the floor. A pulse beam scorched past her, close enough to blind her vision white. She blinked furiously, then shook her head and advanced again, sweat darkening the collar of her uniform. She moved differently now, sharper, faster, each strike carrying the memory of Earth's martial arts drilled into her bones. The Academy drones were powerful, but they were predictable. Kara was not. The Ythron instructor finally snapped a command, and the last 4 drones locked into unified formation. Their cannons aligning together, they unleashed a wall of energy that seared toward her in unison. Kara's heart hammered, but she grinned through. She bolted sideways, sprinting full tilt, until the blast trailed just behind her heels. She zigzagged, forcing the machines to adjust aim, then slid across the arena floor, scooping up another piece of wreckage. The slab of alloy was still hot, but she hefted it like a shield and charred. Beams scorched the makeshift barrier, the heat biting at her arms, yet she drove forward anyway. With a roar, she rammed the alloy slab into the nearest drone's chest, pinning its cannon arm against its body. She yanked free the drone's own weapon, and twisted until it now armed with a pulse cannon. She turned and fired into the line, hitting 2 more squarely before the weapon sputtered and died in her hands. Even drained of charge, she hurled it like a hammer into the last drone's head. Metal crunched and the unit toppled. The silence in the classroom was total. Only the hiss of fried circuits filled the air. Kara stood panting, her hair plastered to her forehead, her uniform scorched and torn. Her knuckles were raw, but her eyes glittered with stubborn pride. She scanned the debris and then looked up at her alien classmates as though daring them to laugh now. None did. The Shilin cadet, who had mocked her, pressed back into its chair, crystalline features flickering with unease. The Vorik leaned forward with a low rumble of approval. The instructor hissed into the comm, and the floor rumbled once more. This time, instead of drones, the arena wall shifted outward. A holographic battlefield expanded across the chamber, showing trenches, towers, and swarming enemy constructs. The combat simulation was no longer a classroom exercise. It was shifting into war-level engagement. Kara flexed her fingers, wiped sweat from her brow, and stepped toward the light. She was only warming up, and the aliens knew it. The battlefield stretched wider than the classroom itself, the Academy's walls dissolving into a full simulation dome. Towers of alien alloy rose on one side. Trenches and burning craters dotted the other, and swarms of automated enemy constructs surged across the terrain. The alien cadets murmured in disbelief. A war-level simulation had never been activated during a lesson. Yet the instructors were pushing it further. The Yin instructor's voice resonated from the overhead speakers, declaring that this was no longer a test of reflexes, but a measurement of species resilience. Kara cracked her neck, bruises forming along her arms, her hands trembling slightly from the weight of everything she had already endured. And still she walked forward into the simulated battlefield alone. The alien cadets leaned in, some whispering bets on how quickly she would fall, others silent, as if sensing something greater. The constructs were armored quadrupeds, bristling with spikes and energy lances. They charged in a tidal wave, eyes glowing like molten sun. Kara sprinted forward, not away, weaving through rubble and leaping trenches with an agility that seemed impossible. She snatched up a jagged rod from the ground, a broken antenna left behind by the simulation, and wielded it like a staff. The first quadruped lunged. Kara spun the rod, cracking against its leg joint, then drove the point upward into its throat. Sparks erupted, and it collapsed in a heap. Another slammed into her side, sending her sprawling across the dirt. She rolled, bruised but not broken, and scrambled back to her feet. Staff raised. Every alien eye in the classroom was fixed on her now. The Shullan muttered that this wasn't supposed to be possible. Kara didn't hear. She was already in motion again. She vaulted over one quadruped, twisting midair to jab her weapon into its back, and landed hard on the far side. The simulation adapted quickly, sending constructs to surround her, but Kara dropped into a crouch, smacking the ground with her staff to kick up dust. She lunged at the nearest and ducked beneath its swipe, ramming her shoulder into its chest. It stumbled, colliding with another, and she spun to strike both with lightning speed until they sputtered into silence. Pulse fire rained down from towers in the distance. Kara bolted toward them, weaving between blasts until she reached the base. She leapt onto a crumbling ledge and began scaling upward with nothing but raw strength. The cadets shouted in disbelief as she climbed higher and higher, dodging fire until she hauled herself onto the tower's platform. A massive construct waited there, twice her size, wielding a blade as long as her body. Kara tightened her grip on her staff. The construct swung down, metal hissing, and she sidestepped, the blade carving sparks from the floor. She swung upward, striking its faceplate, then jabbed again into its exposed wiring. It screeched, flailing, and she ducked beneath its strikes until it toppled off the tower and exploded in the trench below. Kara seized its fallen blade, dragging it across the platform, then pointed it at the other towers as if challenging the simulation itself. The battlefield had erupted into chaos. Dozens of constructs swarmed, towers aligning to crush her with overwhelming fire, yet she charged down into them, swinging the blade with ferocity, cutting through steel and circuits as though fueled by something the simulation couldn't measure. Every time she should have fallen, she found another angle, another burst of energy, another way to twist the enemy against itself. Dust and light filled the air, explosions rocking the ground, the simulation trembling as if struggling to contain her. Finally, after what felt like hours compressed into minutes, Kara stood alone on the battlefield, surrounded by broken constructs and smoldering ruins. The simulation flickered, collapsing back into the classroom's walls. The cadets blinked, adjusting to the sudden return to normalcy, but the silence lingered. Kara dropped the blade, shoulders heaving, sweat streaking her face. She turned toward the instructors. Wait. The Yinan hesitated, then announced that the simulation had been pushed to its maximum level, and still the human cadet remained standing. The alien students erupted into noise, shouts of disbelief, arguments, mutters of fear, yet beneath it all, a current of respect began to ripple through them. Kara sat down heavily on the arena floor, rubbing her aching arms. For her it wasn't about glory. She had simply faced what was placed in front of her, and refused to yield. That was what it meant to be human, and the Academy had witnessed it with their own eyes. From that day onward, the tale of the human who defeated the simulator barehanded spread through alien halls, not as a joke, but as a legend. Cadets who once laughed at her fell silent when she passed, and those who doubted began to wonder what else humans could endure. Kara never boasted, never claimed superiority, yet her very presence shifted something within the Academy. That day in the alien classroom, humanity had not merely survived. It had taught, It proved that strength was not only in claws, armor, or technology. Sometimes strength was the refusal to stop fighting, no matter how impossible the odds. That was the lesson none of them would ever forget. Moments later, the Academy headmaster arrived, summoned by the chaos and reports flooding the network. A towering insectoid, armored in shimmering carapace, stepped into the room, scanning the wreckage of sparking drones. His compound eyes narrowed on Kara, who sat calmly, breathing hard but no longer shaking. He demanded answers, and the stunned instructors recounted every detail of her performance. The headmaster's antennae twitched as he processed their words. Then his gaze fell upon Kara. She did not flinch, did not bow, only met his stare, as if daring him to decide if she belonged. The headmaster raised a clawed arm, silencing the whispers. "The human," he declared, his voice echoing through the chamber, "has passed trials meant to break our finest warriors. She has not only survived, but adapted, and in adapting surpassed expectation. Let it be known, humans are not to be underestimated." The room erupted not in disbelief, but in awe. Some cadets cheered, others bowed their heads in humility. A few looked at Kara with something close to admiration, realizing her refusal to yield had reshaped their lessons forever. Kara closed her eyes for a moment, exhaustion overtaking her, but a faint smile curved her lips, not because she sought glory, but because she knew her kind had been underestimated one too many times. Today she had set the record straight. The simulation dome powered down, restoring the classroom's ordinary glow. Yet nothing about the academy felt ordinary anymore. The legend of that day would travel far beyond its walls, whispered from one species to the next. Humans, they would say, could not be measured by conventional scales of strength or logic. Humans fought as though every battle were a puzzle solved, not with raw power, but with a spirit that could not be extinguished. Slowly, Kara rose, every muscle aching, but her steps steady as she left the arena floor. The cadets parted without command, forming a silent corridor of respect. No one mocked, no one laughed. The silence was louder than any cheer. She walked out no longer an outsider, but proof that humanity had earned its place among the stars. And though her body trembled with fatigue, she knew this was not the end of her journey. It was only the beginning of humanity's story in the galaxy.